Good day, everyone, my dear students. So today we're going to discuss another lesson, which is still under chapter 1 of our discussion about quadratic equation. So we are now on lesson number 5. So our lesson number 5 will focus on solving equations transformable to quadratic equation. So we are here going to solve equations wherein at first we cannot say quadratic, but if we are going to apply mathematical concepts, for example, so we are going to make it quadratic, then solve it using any methods that we have discussed in solving quadratic equation. So how are we going to do that? So let's start with discussion now. So in order for us to solve quadratic equation or equations transformable to quadratic equation, there are steps that we have to follow. So these steps, still, we're going to hide it through an acronym or in a word uh, wherein we can follow in order for us to solve those equations which can be transformed into quadratic equation. So what is that steps that we're going to apply? So we call that as uso. So bakit nga ba uso? Yung steps natin in solving equations which are transformable to quadratic equation. So uso, it's because uh, why is it that every time may mga bagay na nauuso, the tendency is we imitate it. We want to have something like that. So, ayun yung ano na sa atin, instinct na sa atin na every time na mayroong bago, gusto natin magkaroon din tayo ng ganon. Without even realizing yung katayuan natin sa buhay. So, yung iba sa atin, pag may mga nauuso, gusto magkaroon ng ganun, papabili ka agad. So, uh, is that thing essential? Or is that thing important? So, kung meron ka naman nagagamit pa, then why do you have to make your parents buy things like that for you? So, since lahat naman kayo nakaasa pa sa mga magulang ninyo, so uh, kung ano yung meron kayo ngayon, so be contented about it. So, hindi natin kailangang uh, maghanap pa ng mas mataas pa doon na every time na mas may mauusong bago, eh gusto natin kung ano meron tayo, papalitan na natin ng mas bago. So, ng mindset dapat natin, hindi ganun. Well, walang problema kung nakararang niya ka sa buhay, that's fine. Pero kung hindi naman, uh, hintayin mo yung time na ikaw na mismo yung makakabili ng mga sarili mong gamit galing sa perang pinaghirapan mo. Kasi since ngayon, nakaasa ka pa lang sa mga magulang mo, so, syempre, yung finances na ginagamit nila para yun sa inyo, sa pag-aaral mo, sa mga pang bagay, or sa panggamit na 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 pwede paggamitan as as uh, as isang pamilya, yung mga gamit sa buong pamilya. So pag ikaw nakatapos ka na ng pag-aaral, so and you are earning money, so you can buy all you want. Pwede mo nang gawin kung anong pwede mo nang bilhin kung anong gusto mong bilhin. Kung may mga mauuso, so pwede mo na siyang magawa because you are already earning. And that will happen if you will finish first your studies. Kasi kapag nakatapos ka ng pag-aaral, mas marami yung opportunity na uh, makakakaroon ka ng magandang trabaho na mataas yung sweldo. So if that is the case, kapag nangyari yon, then yung mga gusto mong bilhin, kasi sa time na yun siguro, may mga mas uso pa. Kasi nag-evolve yung mundo natin, so may mga bago na uso. In a month nga, may bagong uso na naman. So yung uso na gusto mo ngayon, sa time na yan, laos na. Kasi may bagong uso na. So, wait for that time to come na makatapos ka ng pag-aaral at mabili mo yung mga gusto mo sa pamamagitan ng sarili mong pagsisikap o sarili mong pera. So, yun yung steps natin na tinatawag nating puso. So, ano ba yung steps na yan? Let's start with the first one. So, you. Sabi dito, in order for you to transform equations which are not at first we can say quadratic, but if we are going to make use of mathematical concepts, we can make it quadratic. So that's why the first thing you are going to do is use mathematical concepts or ideas to transform equations. Because most of the times, or all given equations here are uh, equations wherein you cannot say quadratic. But with the application of step number one, using of mathematical concepts or ideas to transform equations will help us because these equations uh, can be transformed into quadratic equation if you're just going to make use of the right mathematical concepts for it. So once you transform it into quadratic equation, S will follow. So S stands for see to it that you will transform it into quadratic equation. So yun yung goal natin. Since we are in quadratic equation, so let us make sure that once we apply mathematical concepts on those equations, we have to see to it that the equation that we form is a quadratic equation. Then last, O. O stands for oblige yourself to solve the equation using any method. So since we have already discussed four methods in solving quadratic equation, that's namely extracting the roots, factoring, factoring, uh, completing the square, and and using quadratic formula. So those four methods now, we are going to use it uh, depending on the given equation. So, uh, if you can solve a given equation by using any of those methods, which you think is the easiest method that you can use, so yun yung gagamitin mo. So, you have to oblige yourself to solve the equation using any methods. In that way, you are now going to come up with the solutions to a given quadratic equation. So again, in order for us to solve equations transformable to quadratic equation, all we have to do is to apply the steps we call uso. So now let's apply the steps through examples. That is by answering examples about uh, that kind of equations that can be transformed into quadratic equation. So let's have example number one. So example number one here is x times the quantity x plus 5 is equal to 36. So if we're going to look at the given equation, the equation at first, we cannot say quadratic because we cannot see there a variable whose highest exponent is 2. So uh, in order for us to make that quadratic, so since that equation can be transformed into quadratic equation, so we're going to make use the steps. Sabi doon, we have to use mathematical concepts or ideas to transform it into quadratic equation. So paano yun? So in the case of example number one, so the mathematical concept that we need here is the concept of what we call distributive property. So you have to multiply that x there on both terms of the binomial. So if we're going to do that, so ang solution natin, una, that x given times the quantity x plus 1 is equal to 36, the first thing we're going to do is to apply distributive property. So that's the concept that we are going to use. So we have x times x there and x times 5. So if we're going to do that, we'll have x squared plus 5x is equal to 36. Then since the equation is not written in general form, so we have to transform it first to general form, the quadratic equation. That is by moving this 36 to the left side of the equation. So that will become x squared plus 5x minus 36 is equal to 0. Then this left side of the equation now is a quadratic trinomial wherein we form now the what we call uh, quadratic equation written in its general form. Then we are going to think of the method out of the four methods that we have discussed, which we think the method that best apply to solve the given quadratic equation. But if I'm going to ask, the best method that I will be using for me to solve that quadratic equation is by using factoring. So that means if factoring is what I am going to use, so that means I'm going to find out factors of 36 here that when added the sum is 5. So what are the factors of 36? So factor of 36, that's 9 times 4. It can be 12 times 3. What else? And um, 18 times 2. So 9 times 4, 12 times 3, and 18 times 2. Alin doon sa mga factors na yon ang kapag sinabtract natin, ang sagot ay 5. Bakit sinabtract? It's because the last term is negative. So we are here, the product is negative. So ibig sabihin, the two factors, one of the two factors are, uh, one of the two factors is negative. To come up with an answer, negative. So that's why minus yung anuhin natin, i-apply natin. So which of the three factors of 36 that when subtracted, the difference is 5. So that would be 9 times 5 because 9 minus 4, 9 times 4 rather, because 9 minus 4 is 5. So now, since positive yung 5 and negative yung 36, so isa dapat sa 9 and 4 ay negative. So titignan mo lang yung operation of the middle term. Kung positive yon, ibig sabihin positive yung mas malaking number. So ibig sabihin positive yung 9 and the negative is yung 4. So let's form its factors. We know that the factors of a quadratic trinomial are two binomials. So the factors are x plus 9, the square root, the factors of x squared is x times x, while the second terms of its factors are the right factors of negative 36 that when added, the sum is 5, and that is positive 9 and negative 4. Then from there, we're going to apply the zero product property. That is by equating both factors to 0. So by doing that, we can solve now for the solutions to the given quadratic equation. So we come up with x, which is equal to negative 9, and the other one is x is equal to 4. So if we are going to solve the example number 1, na x times the quantity x plus 5 is equal to 36, we'll come up with an answer which is, or which are negative 9 and positive 4. So that's how we solve an equation that at first we cannot say quadratic. And again, if we're going to make use of mathematical concept or ideas, we can make that equation as quadratic equation. So that's how we answer problem number 1. So to further understand the lesson, let's try to answer another example. Let's have your example number 2. So in example number 2, the given is a raised to 4 minus 9a squared minus 36 is equal to 0. So maybe you would think na since meron tayong 2 there na exponent, baka maisip natin na quadratic. But ang pinag-uusapan natin na quadratic, the highest exponent of the variable is 2. But in the case of example number 2, the highest exponent is 4. So, meaning the given equation is not quadratic equation, but we can make a way to make that equation quadratic equation. Or we can transform that equation into quadratic equation. But the question here now is how? So again, using step number 1, we are going to use mathematical concepts and ideas in order for us to transform it into quadratic equation. So what are we going to do first is we are going to let a squared equal to x. So in place of a squared here, for every a squared, that is equivalent to x. So paano natin malalaman kung ano yung represent natin by the variable x? So let's take a look at of uh, the literal coefficient of the linear term, yung pangalawang term natin when it was arranged in general form. So, yung pangalawang term ng literal coefficient, yun yung i-represent natin by the variable x. So, ang ibig sabihin lang nan, for every a squared, that is equivalent to x. So, what are we going to do? So, let's form now an equation wherein we can form quadratic equation. So, let's take a look at first a raised to 4. Yung a raised to 4, kung isipin natin, if we're going to let a squared equal to x, how many a squared there are in a raised to 4? So that is 2. Or, divide natin, a raised to 4 divide by a squared. That is a squared. Diba? Or, as I was saying, since there are 2 a squared in a raised to 4, so we come, so for every a squared, for that is equivalent to x. So we'll come up with x squared. Then minus a squared, we mentioned that we let that as x. So that would be minus 9x minus 36, copy lang natin yon, equal to 0. So in that case, this equation now is a quadratic equation. We come up with this, that is by letting a squared equal to x. So since it's already quadratic equation, so we are now going to solve this using any method again. Any methods in solving quadratic equation. And again, if I'm going to solve for it, I will use factoring as a method. So that means I'm going to use again the sum and product method. So that means I'll think of factors again of 36 that when added, the sum is 9. So let's find out first factors of 36 regardless of its sign. So 36 again, 18 times 2, 36 times 1, 12 times 3, and 9 times 4. So, doon sa apat na factors na yon, since negative yung product niya, ibig sabihin yung isang factor doon ay negative sa bawat factors niya. So, titignan mo ngayon yung gitna. Negative yon. So, ibig sabihin, kung negative yung product, ima-minus natin. Which of the four factors na binigay natin na kapag minus, ang sagot ay 9. So, we're going to choose 12 and 3. Pag minus, ang sagot ay, because 12 minus 3 is 9. Then look at the middle operation. So dapat ang isang number doon ay negative. So in between 12 and 9, ibig sabihin kung ano yung sign of the middle, that would be the sign of the larger number. So ibig sabihin, negative yung 12, positive yung 3. Then, let's form now its factors. We know that the factors of x squared are x times x. Then, yung factors kanina na sinabi natin, 12 and 3, since negative yung gitna, negative yung mas malaki. Kaya minus 12 to, plus 3 yung sa kabila. Then, equate both factors to 0 with the application of the zero product property. Then, solve for the values of the variable. So, if we're going to do that, we'll have the values of it as x is equal to 12 and x is equal to negative 3. So those are the solutions to this equation that we transformed into quadratic equation. So we come up with an answer which is x is equal to 12 and x is equal to negative 3. So may question kayo. Okay, let us answer this time example number 3. So the given is 2 over x minus 3x over 2 is equal to negative 2. So as you can see, the given equation is at first not a quadratic equation. But if we are going to apply concepts or to use mathematical concepts or ideas, we can make that equation quadratic equation. Then after transforming it into quadratic equation, then let's solve it using any methods in solving quadratic equation. So how are we going to transform that and solve that given equation? So here's your solution. So what you're going to do is to transform this quadratic equation, this equation into quadratic equation. We need the concept of the what we call LCD, o tinatawag nating least common denominator. Because the usual is pag nakakakita tayo ng fractions in a given problems in math, so ang tendency, pinanghihinaan kagad tayo ng loob na sagutin yun. As ang iniisip natin, kapag may fractions, mahirap kaagad. Without even trying to answer it na may paraan naman para ma-remove natin yung fraction so that mas mapadali natin yung solutions natin or pagkuha natin sagot when we are solving an equation. So what we are going to do is, let's remove this denominator of the fraction in this given equation. That is by multiplying the LCD on both sides of the equation. So hanapin muna natin yung LCD. So there are only two denominators here. The denominators are 2 and x. So since they are two different terms, all you have to do is just simply multiply the two. So we'll come up the LCD as 2 times x, which is 2x. So that 2x is to be multiplied on both sides of the equation so that it will become like this. So you're going to multiply that LCD on both sides of the equation. Then from there, on the left side of the equation, with this LCD, the first is you're going to divide it by the denominator, then multiply on the numerator. So if we're going to do that, we do have 2x divided by x, that will be 2 kasi may eliminate yung x. Then 2 times 2, that will be positive 4 or 4. Minus 2x divided by 2, that would be x because 2 will be cancelled out. Then x times 3x is equal to 3x squared. So meron tayong 4 minus 3x squared is equal to negative 2 times negative 2 times 2x will have negative 4x. So that it will become like that when we simplify this. As you can see, nung ginawa natin yon, ginamit yung LCD, wala na tayong fraction doon sa equation natin, which is already we know that uh, it's already in a quadratic equation because of this term. Meron tayo doon term na matatawag nating quadratic term. But if you're going to look at the equation, it was not yet arranged in general form of the equation. So let us rearrange it first. Pag ni-rearrange natin yan, mumove lang naman natin 4x to the right side. Then, ito, dilipat sa unahan. Then, pag mag-yan, dapat ang arrangement niya, quadratic term, linear term, and the constant term. So, magiging ganito. That's negative 3x squared plus 4x plus 4 is equal to 0. But your A is negative here. Meron tayong minention doon sa first lesson natin na mas madali na ma-solve yung quadratic equation if your A is positive. So, let's make our A positive here. So, we can make it positive by multiplying both sides of the equation by the opposite sign of it. Na nothing happens with the uh, numerical coefficients. So we're just going to multiply. It's either you're going to multiply it by negative number or you're going to multiply it by negative 1. Kasi any number multiplied by 1 is the number itself. Diba? Yun nga lang, for you to make this negative 3 here positive, you're going to multiply negative 1. So that's negative 1. When you multiply negative 1 on both sides of the equation, all the signs and operations of all the terms will change. So it will become 3x squared from negative 3x squared will become kanina, plus 4x kanina, magiging minus 4x, then plus 4, magiging minus 4 is equal to 0. Ito na ngayon, yung equation na isosolve natin written in general form. And again, we are going to make use here any of the four methods that we introduced. So again, if I'm going to solve for that given equation, syempre I'm going to solve it, which I think the easiest method that I can use to solve is the factoring. Most specifically, with the application of the AC method or the whole sa pack method that I introduced to you. So, ano yung AC method? So, you're going to multiply first the value of A here and the value of C. The value of A and C is 4, 3, and negative 4 yon. So, disregard muna natin yung negative. So, that's 3 times 4. We do have 3 times 4, which is 12. Now, that 12, yung magiging basis natin. So, maghanap tayo ng factors ng 12. Ano ba mga factors ng 12? That would be 12 times 1. That is 6 times 2. What else? 4 times 3. 6 times 12 times 1, 6 times 2, 4 times 3. So since negative yung 4 here, that should be negative 12. So ibig sabihin ko, negative 12 yung factors natin, yung numbers natin, yung product of AC, ibig sabihin, isa sa mga factors of the three factors of 12 na binigay natin ay negative. Isa doon dapat ay negative. So paano natin malalaman kung ano yung negative? So tingnan muna natin. Alin doon, since negative yun, alin doon kapag minayin sa three factors na yun, pag minus, ang sagot ay 4. Alin sa 12 and 1, 4 and 3, and 6 and 2. So, syempre, pag minus natin tatlong yon, so mapipili natin yung 6 and 2. So, 6 because 6 minus 2 is equal to 4. But since negative 12 yung product ng AC, so ibig sabihin, and negative yung middle term ng gitna, ibig sabihin, dun sa 6 and 2, negative yung mas mataas na number. The higher number is 6, so that means negative yung 6, positive yung 2. So that's negative 6 and 2 will form the second terms of its factors. So ano ngayon magiging binomial factors of that left side? So magiging ganito. So that is 3x minus 6 times the quantity 3x plus 2 is equal to 0. So magiging ganito yung binomial. Saan nakuha yung 3x na yon? Sabi natin kapag AC method na ginamit natin, yung first terms of its factors, that is the numerical coefficient of the quadratic term as well as the variable being used. So 3x yon. So 3x and 3x are the first terms of its factors. Then the second terms of its factors are the factors of negative 12. That when added, the sum is negative 4. So that would be negative 6 and positive 2. Ito pwede pa nating masimplify. So since ang goal naman natin is ma-solve yung answer to a given quadratic equation, pwede na nating hindi gawin na i-simplify yun. Right away, let's apply zero product property. So we have to separate both factors and equated it into 0. So ito, from here, we are going to move the constant term to the right side of the equation. Move negative 6 to the right. Dito, move yung 2 to the right side of the equation. Pag minove yung negative 6, magiging positive 6 dito. Pag minove yung positive 2, magiging negative 2 sa kabila. So, magiging 6 dito. 6 divided by 3, we do have 2 as the first solution. While on the other side, when you move negative 2, when you move 2 to the right of the equation, magiging negative 2. Since yung x natin may kasama pang 3, so we're not yet through. We still have to divide both sides of the equation by 3 to come up with the answer as the second solution as negative 2 over 3. So the solutions to a given equation, which at first we cannot say quadratic, but if we're going to make use of mathematical concepts or ideas, we can make that equation quadratic and solve it, and we come up with an answer which are 2 and negative 2 over 3.
Okay, so let us continue now answering more examples about equations transformable to quadratic equation. So let's have example number 4 here. So the given is x plus 7, the quantity of x plus 7 times the quantity of x minus 4 is equal to 12. So that example number 4, that is similar to example number 1 that we have answered earlier. So as you can see on the left side of the equation, we do have here binomial factors. So if you're going to look at the given equation, so you cannot say at first na quadratic equation siya. But according to the steps that we presented, as if you are going to make use of a certain mathematical concept, we can make this equation quadratic equation. So particularly, if you're going to look at this left side of the equation, in order for you to make this a quadratic equation, this equation as quadratic equation, you're going to make use of distributive property. So, paano ba ginagawa yung distributive property? So, we can apply FOIL method there. FOIL method, or we can also apply Parrot's Beak method. So, paano yun? That is x times x, that would be x squared. Then, x times 4, or negative 4, that would be negative 4x. Then 7 times x, that would be plus 7x, because that's positive 7x. Then positive 7 times negative 4, you'll have negative 28. Then it will be equal to 12. Now, when you do distributive property, as you can see, nagkaroon na siya ng tinatawag nating binomial factor. A variable whose exponent is 2. So, let's simplify first this middle term. Then, isabay na natin na i-move yung 12 to the left side of the equation. Because both negative 28 and 12 are constants. So, let's proceed. So, simplify. We have x squared. Then, negative 4 plus 7x will come up with positive 3x. So, that will become plus 3x. Then, when you move 12 to the left side, that would be negative 28 minus 12 is equal to 0. So, that's what will happen. Then, simplify this constants here. So, we do have here x squared plus 3x. Then, negative 28 minus 12 is equal to negative 40. So, it will be minus 40 equal to 0. Then, from this given, so we are now going to solve it using any method, any methods na pinag-aralan natin about quadratic equation. So, if we can solve it by factoring, then, let's solve it by factoring. So, let's find out if there are factors of 40 that when added, the sum is 3. So, kung maiisip mo na meron, of course, you have to use factoring now. So, instead of using any other method. So, let's make use of factoring. So, the factors of that quadratic trinomial are two binomials. So, factors ng x squared using sum and product method, that would be x times x. Then, ang factors ng 40. Factors ng 40 that when added, the sum is 3. Ano ba mga factors ng 40? Disregard mo natin yung negative sign, ha? That would be 8 times 5. That would be 10 times 4. What else? So, wala na. So, since negative 4 yon, ibig sabihin, one of the numbers here, one of its factor, of one of the given factors is negative. So, ngayon pipili mo which of the two factors is when subtracted the difference is 3, and that is 8 and 5. Now, when we subtract 8 and 5, the answer is 3. So therefore, the right factors is 8 times 5. So, since negative yung 40, ibig sabihin, since positive yung middle term, ibig sabihin, the highest number is positive. So, positive yung 8, negative yung 5. So that it will be equal to negative 40 as the product of it. Then, these factors will form the second terms of the factors or the binomial factors of that quadratic trinomial together with their signs. So that's positive 8, kaya plus 8, then negative 5, kaya minus 5. Then, using zero product property, that would be x plus 8 equal to 0, and the other one is x minus 5 equal to 0. Then solve for the value of the variable by moving the constant term to the right side of the equation on both equations formed. Then we come up with x sub 1 as the first solution, as from positive 8 move to the right side, it will become negative 8. Then on the other side, moving negative 5 to the right side of the equation, it will become x is equal to positive 5. So, that given equation for number 4, if we are going to use mathematical concept, particularly the distributive property, and form a quadratic equation, we can solve that quadratic equation with the use of factoring. So we will come up with the solutions as negative 8 and positive 5. So that's how we answer problem number 4. So let's try another example. Let's have this. So for us to really understand the lesson more clearly, so let's try another example. Let's have example number 5. So number 5, that would be b raised to 6 minus b cubed minus 90 is equal to 0. So, if you're going to look at the given equation is similar to example number 2 earlier. So, in order for us to solve this, because as you can see, it's not a quadratic equation because the highest exponent is not 2. So, what you're going to do is, just like what we did on example number 2, we are going to let a variable with the lowest exponent there as other variable. So in the case of b raised to 6 minus b cubed, the variable with the lowest exponent is b cubed. So we are going to let b cubed is equal to x. So by doing that, we can form an equation wherein we can make this equation a quadratic equation. So that is how many b cubed, b raised to 6 divided by b raised to 3, that would be b squared. So for every b cubed, that is equivalent to x. So how many b cubed we have on b raised to 6? So that would be 2. So that's why we do have x squared minus how many b cubed we have on b cubed. That would be 1, and that would be just x. Then minus 90 equal to 0. Then since it's already a quadratic equation, let us now solve for it using any method. And again, as I am telling you, if you can solve it by factoring, then solve it right away by factoring. Because the usual is that we can easily solve a given quadratic equation when it is factorable. So in the case of this given equation, it's factorable. There are factors of negative 90 that when added, the sum is negative 1. The numerical coefficient of this is negative 1. So we know that it's by the factors of that quadratic trinomial are square of binomial. Now, let's find out factors of 90. Ano ba mga factors yan? Meron yung 45 times 2. So, meron yang 15 times 6. Then, meron yang 10 times 9. What else? Meron pa bang factors of 90? Then, since negative yon, ibig sabihin, isa doon sa mga factors na yon ay negative. And since negative yung middle term natin, ibig sabihin, we are going to find factors of negative of 90 that when subtracted, the difference is 1. So, which of these factors na kapag minus natin, ang sagot ay 1. At yung factors na yon ay yung 10 times 9. So, ibig sabihin, kung negative yung middle term, ibig sabihin, negative yung higher number. So, negative yung 10. So, that 10, negative 10 and 9 will form factors of the second terms of the factors of this quadratic trinomial. Of course, the first terms of its factors are x times x because we are factoring here x squared. Then, the right factors for negative 90, that would be negative 10, kaya minus 10. Then, positive 9, kaya plus 9, equal to 0. Then, with the application again of the zero product property, we do have x minus 10 equal to 0, and the other one is x plus 9 equal to 0. Then, let's solve for the values of the variable. So, move the constant term to the right side of the equation with the application of addition and subtraction of equality. When it comes to the left side, we are going to make use of addition property of equality, while on the left side is subtraction property of equality. Then, solve for x. We do have here x sub 1, which is equal to negative 10, that will become positive 10 as the first solution. Then on the right side, we do have x is equal to negative 9 as the second solution. So with this quadratic equation, so if we're going to solve it using the method of factoring, we're going to come up with the solutions as positive 10 and negative 9. Okay, para mas maintindihan niyo ng sobra-sobra kung paano ba mag-solve ng equations which are transformable to quadratic equation, let's have another example. Let's have example number 6 here. So the given is 5x over 6 plus 2 over 3x is equal to negative 2. So that example is similar to example number 3 that we have answered earlier. So in order for us to simplify this, because at first, as you can see, we cannot say it is quadratic. But if we're going to simplify this using a mathematical concept, we'll find out that it's really quadratic. So what we are going to do is to look for the LCD. Since it involves fractions, so we are going to use the LCD in order for us to simplify this, to transform it into quadratic equation. So, what would be the LCD when it comes to the denominator part na 6 and or numerical coefficient 6 and 3? 6 is exactly divisible by 3. So, that's why we'll get 6 as as the LCD. But since x is another denominator, so we will include also x on the LCD. So that's why the LCD is 6x. The LCD is 6x. So what we are going to do is to multiply that LCD na 6x on both sides of the equation. So kasi sabi natin, whatever you do on one side, you will also do that on the other side to apply the concept of equality. Then, on the left side, this LCD is to be divided on each of its denominators, then multiply on the numerators. So 6x divided by 6, that would be x. 10 times 5x, that would be 5x squared. Plus 6x divided by 3x, that would be 2 times 2, that is 4, is equal to negative 2 times 6x, that would be negative 12x. Because in the case of negative 2, since it's a whole number, so we're just simply going to multiply it. Then, we know that it's already quadratic equation because of this term. Meron na tayong term na tinatawag natin quadratic term. But yun nga lang, hindi pa siya arranged in general form. So, we still have to arrange it by moving negative 12x to the right side of the equation. So, that will be 5x squared plus 12x plus 4 is equal to 0. Then from here, we are now going to answer this quadratic equation by using any method. And again, as I am telling you, if you can solve it by factoring, then let's solve it right away by factoring. So in the case of example number 6, the quadratic equation can be solved by factoring, particularly by using the whole sapak method. Tinatawag nating sapak method. So paano yun? So let's make use first of the AC method, the A and the C. So what we're going to do is to multiply it first. Pag binultiply natin yan, ang sagot ay 20. Now we are going to find out factors of 20 that when added the sum is 12. Pag in-add natin factors ng 20, the sum is 12. Ano ba mga factors ng 20? That is 10 times 2. What else? 5 times 4 and 20 times 1. But we will disregard any more 20 times 1. So on the two factors given, so which of these factors that when added, the sum is 12? And of course, that would be 10 and 2. So that 10 and 2 will form the second terms of its factors. But what would be the first terms of its factors? We know that its factors are binomial factors. We know already the second terms. What would be the first terms if we're going to make use of the AC method? The right factors for 20, that would be 10 and 2. So, as I have mentioned to you, kapag AC method yung ginamit, so the numerical coefficient of the quadratic term na 5 together with the variable will form the first term of the binomial factor. So that would be 5x. Then the factors of 20 that when added the sum is 12 will form its second terms of its factors. That's positive 10 kaya plus 10, positive 2 kaya plus 2. Then from here, as you can see, this binomial factor can still be simplified because both 5 and 10 are divisible by 5. So pag sinimplify natin, that would be x plus 2, 10 times the quantity, 5x plus 2 is equal to 0. Then use yung tinatawag nating zero product property. That would be x plus 2 is equal to 0, and the other one is 5x plus 2 is equal to 0. Then on the left side, the equation na pinorm natin, move natin constant term, ganun din dun sa right side of the equation. Okay, when you move 2 to the right side of the equation, so we'll come up with the first solution as x is equal to negative 2. So that would be the first solution. Then, second solution will be move 2 to the right side of the equation. That will become 5x is equal to negative 2. But still 5 here, x here is still accompanied by 5. So we still have to remove 5 here by dividing both sides of the equation by 5. So that it will come up with an answer which is x is equal to negative 2 over 5 as your second solution. So therefore, if you are going to answer this equation, na at first we cannot say quadratic, but if we're going to make use of a mathematical concept, we'll make it quadratic. And the solutions are negative 2 and negative 2 over 5.